of a very complex system in which resource use plays a role and in which energy use plays a role. There are two sides of the same coin. And today we want to discuss these interlinkages between resource use and energy transition and climate.
And I said already in the beginning that energy on itself is a multi-headed monster, so to say. So you need coalitions, people working together, organizations working together with civilians, organizations, knowledge institutions, the public sector. They all need to work together on what is needed to pursue that energy system transition.
We have seen over the last 20, 30 years an enormous emphasis on new energy. But the very fact that out there is a material connection, not only because we need so much copper, but energy is only an instrument to do something else, which is consume, produce, travel and so on. So energy is the instrument. And if we focus on the instrument and do nothing about the baseline, then of course it doesn't help very much in the end. Okay, we have everything solar now and wind, but still we waste everything. We eat the crust of the planet within 200-300 years completely. We swallow it. So you have to focus on the connection. And it's extremely important that therefore the connection between resource and energy is a permanent one, a permanent construct.
There it is. We want to move from this, the brown economy, the fossil fuels, to the green economy. We still need resources. We just need different resources. And some of them are listed on here: cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements, you name it. We want wind turbines, batteries, solar panels. This barn is full of them. Minerals go into them. People think that mining is bad. You probably think mining is bad. And maybe it is bad, but if we want to have computers and cars and bicycles and windmills, we need to get the metals from somewhere. So we also need to talk about that. We need to be honest about what we need and how we can get it in the best possible way. The value chain actually starts with knowing where the resources are in the rock. Mining them, processing them, designing them in smart ways. Maybe substituting some raw materials with other raw materials that are less toxic, or that we can get out in environmentally better ways. Then it, of course, is the use and the reuse, and finally the recycling. And together, all these things constitute both the circular economy and actually the raw materials value chain. So a very, very important thing here is that there's waste coming off at all places in this loop. And so the way to think about this is that we want to be sure that we get things into the loop in the best possible way, but it has to get into the loop to begin with. We want to keep it in the loop for as long as possible. We want design solutions to keep it in the loop for as long as possible, and we want to get better at recycling what actually makes it all the way through the loop. But there's actually a paper published last year that, with the title Conceptualizing the Circular Economy, an analysis of 114 definitions, and I'm not making this up. And at the end of the paper, of course, there's 115 definitions. So everyone loves the circular economy. You smack a green circle onto anything and everyone's for it, and everyone's saying that's what we need to do, without actually thinking about what does it actually mean. Not only are we more people, we use more per person. This figure here, this is a logarithmic scale, normalized to year 1900. We used one of each of these types of elements. So how much do we use today? Well, aluminium, 1,000 times as much as we used 100 years ago. And even if you look at the more sort of pedestrian things, you've got chrome, nickel, copper. This is 8 times as much, this is 10 times as much, this is 100 times as much. How good are we actually at recycling it technologically? How much are we actually doing? And the thing is, there's stuff that just goes off to the side. Fireworks, for instance, has metals in them, and we can't find them afterwards. And then we have what is theoretically sort of recyclable, but we don't necessarily have the technologies. So some of the technology that we're missing gets some stuff to go off on the side here again. And then from what is potentially recyclable, half of it's in our desk drawers. We don't get it recycled. We don't throw it away. And if you do take your cell phone with the 60 elements down to Umicore and ask them to recycle the metals in it, they will maybe take out 5 metals or 10 metals, not 60 metals, because there's going to be so little in there. And furthermore, they have to unmix the metal, which actually demands a lot of energy. So it's all sort of in the balance. We'll see, but an important thing to remember about the circular economy is that there's 114 definitions, and it's not in itself a goal. It's not the goal, it's the vehicle, it's the means by which we get to something that we think is better than what we have today. No one talks about linear economy as a goal, but a lot of people talk about this as a goal, but it's not. The real goals are these ones. This is what we need to get. And to do that, we need to have much more knowledge and much more innovation. And that's what EIT Raw Materials does. And I'm done. Thank you.
You look at the situation that you have 8 sectors which interchange one with the other. And so changing the way we have, use land use, changing the way we have agriculture has impact also on chemical industry. If you need less chemicals in agriculture, you have an impact on your chemical industry. If you change your steel production, you also might have problems and changes in your car industry. So all these 8 sectors are interlinked and must be looked into. Good part of the story is it is possible. The result of the first scenario is that a resource-efficient pathway towards greenhouse gas neutral Germany is possible. There are a lot of people running around telling there is a full electricity future. That's why I tell it, that there is no full electricity future. If we want to wait 50 years, probably, but if we want to solve it with existing infrastructures as fast as possible, not using new raw materials to building up a new infrastructure, then we have to use our gas system, we have to use air transport system which is existing, etc. That means we have this mixture. There was a time in Germany where the craftsmen didn't know how to install certain things. So you can make whatever you want with legislation, as long as the people do everything wrong, you don't have any success. That means also that you have to continue with education. Lifelong learning is something which we have to have. In this transformation, we need lifelong learning on all levels in all sectors. That's a part of success, and without that, we cannot do it. This lowering of raw material is mainly done phasing out fossils, but also mainly done by decreasing the amount of non-metallic minerals, means building industry. And the third one is mainly done by increasing the lifetime of products. So you see that shifting out of fossil fuels helps us on a material base, but you also have to do a lot in buildings, using building materials much more efficient, reusing them, recycling them. All these means that we have to have a rethinking, a redesigning, we have to go to renewable, regional, repairing, remanufacturing, reusing and recycling. That is more or less 117th definition of circular economy, or 20s or 30s. I don't care about that. It means that we have to think about how much do we need, that's lifestyle, how do we do that, and we have to end to replace that. Last but not least, please think about lifestyle, and lifestyle is something that you can impact every day. Your personal climate change is on your meal and whatever you do, transport and such things. So thank you, and the good story is we can do it, but we have to start yesterday.
What we do is we do some innovation projects with our partners, but we also do a lot of education projects, because when it comes to raw materials and when it comes to the big challenges that we face over the next maybe many decades, they are something that we need to solve together with the coming generations. So there's a big need for education
and for us to be talking across sectors and across different groups, and also globally actually, about the challenges that we face and how we can perhaps solve them. So we're really excited about being this partnership with the Club of Rome and with the Springtide Academy, where we can talk about these things with students from all over the world, basically. I hope it will give some of the young people some inspiration and some great ideas for how they can maybe help secure that we have a sustainable future and that we will meet some of, for instance, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they will need good ideas on all kinds of levels. We need the consumer of raw materials to be responsible in our day-to-day consumption, but also very importantly, we need the people who make the products that we want to also think about these things. And the kids who are here today, they're going to go and become politicians, they're going to go become directors and workers in all these kinds of institutions that together will hopefully help to facilitate that change. And when you look at the consumption and who takes responsibility for what, I think if we can get the manufacturers, so the car companies, the Apples, those kind of companies, if you can get them to take responsibility for the sourcing of the things that go into their products, and also to get them to take responsibility for recycling them, then we've really come a long way. And so these guys will be the decision makers down the road, so we need to get them educated. I hope that we can get even better at talking across sectors and solving some of these really big challenges.
I think one of the interesting things we learn about on the masters that I'm pursuing is the interconnectedness of all the challenges we face. So a lot is said of the big challenge as far as addressing climate change, living more sustainably. And I think the linkage with material use is an interesting one. One of the things I was really taken aback by when I started the program was this notion of the limits to growth and what came out of the Club of Rome work in the 70s. And I think it's interesting that you fast forward 50 years and we're essentially talking about the same thing, but we're trying to get more people to listen to that same idea that's been there. So I think that's, it was one of when I saw the topic of resources and the linkage with the broader energy transition, I thought it would be an interesting day to attend. I think I was particularly struck by the presentation given around the German goals and the idea that we could reduce emissions by 95% by 2050 and material use at the same time by 60%. Now, I know that's one of the really ambitious scenarios, and I question just how much of that scenario relies on really gaining the buy-in and acceptance of the society and community as a whole, and a mass change in behavior. I find it interesting that that's where we're setting our ambition, but I think, as a lot of people find, it's kind of hard to see how you get from where we are today to a reduction of that magnitude when it requires the will of not just politicians and governments and a whole raft of policy making, but change in every aspect of everyone's life on the planet.
So my studies are a lot focused in renewable energy, and because it's a great part of the energy transition that we need to accomplish, but it's not the only part. And there's other things. In one of the important topics is the material use and the raw material use and resources allocation. And I studied economics before, and as an economist, I have a natural tendency to seek efficiency at the maximal level, to find out the optimal level. And resources utilization and raw materials utilization is definitely one of the main concerns for us, because you can lower costs, you can reduce waste, and all of these, in the end, will end up with a less cheaper way, a more efficient way for our production in every single aspect of the economy. So this is quite interesting.
Well, there was a question asked at some stage, and it was basically something like, how can we increase our income by not using or using fewer raw materials? And there was a remark to this question. It was very interesting, and it was basically like, do we really need to grow and to increase our income, or should we instead move away from this perspective. I think this is a really good starting point to think about, and I think that our society nowadays should focus on this and should think about this question a lot, especially here in Europe.
But there is a possibility that the demand for aluminium, for instance, could grow by a factor 8 between 2013 and 2050. This has massive implications in terms of energy demand and of waste generation. What is the issue? It's really to change the mindsets and behaviors in order to use materials smarter, less and longer. Here, when I say change mindsets, it's the mindsets of industry operators, but also of society at large. It has already been told earlier this morning that individual choices, individual behavior is, of course, very critical to the process. Use collective intelligence, and that is really a key message here. I think the solution for the future is us, all together. We need to work together. We need to pull up our sleeves and bring together all our pieces and bits of intelligence, all the diversity of our cultures and experiences. I consider that governance is a driving force that puts the three dimensions of sustainable development together, the economic, the social and the environmental dimensions. You need a driver to put these three bubbles that sometimes float far away from each other. You need a driver to put that together, and that's governance.
The first insight, I already mentioned it, is that the use of critical materials actually saves energy, the example of the LED lamp. Second is that the limited availability and one dominant supplier limits the market freedom. Third is that recycling is indeed a long-term strategy which we need for the long term to be able to maintain the standing stock, which is not going to be a short-term solution to deliver all the metals that we need. And fourth is that due to this development, our dependency increases every year, again and again, and will continue to do so in the next few decades. Solutions. I've got 3 solutions and then I'm finished. First is indeed to look to the possibility of substitution as much as we can, but it's not going to solve the whole problem. Second is that we need to improve circular design, which means that for solar panels, we make sure that we can at least get all the critical metals out again, as far as that's technologically possible, but at present, with our present solar panels, that is very hard. And if we look to wind turbines, this will most likely be in design for longer lifetimes. And the third, and it's maybe not the nicest, but is that we have to consider a European mining industry, at least for some of the critical metals, to see what we can produce within Europe. Because if we look to the global production levels that are needed, it is impossible to completely abandon sourcing from within Europe, if we look to the amount of increase that is required.